here. I'm Rosario. I'm one of the physicians here at Eisenhower and an HIV treatment specialist. I also do men's health as well as in the Meth clinic. And I've been treating HIV for about 20 years, and I myself have been positive for about 22 years. So I'm a newbie to the engaging in HIV, so I've been only 22 years positive. And I have some partners in crime up here. I'd like to introduce myself.
So my name is John. I'm 19.
Hi, John.
Hi, John. No, I work at Eisenhower as well. John Colbert. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I'm really not 19, just in case you're wondering. And I run the men's health clinic there. So we do a lot of sexually transmitted diseases. We do a lot of PEP. We do a lot of PrEP. We do a lot of HIV services as well as endoscopy and HPV. And my partner here.
Hi, I'm Terry Gatewood. I own Blue Tiger Recovery here in Palm Springs. Blue Tiger specializes in gay crystal meth sex addicts. So I'm a sex addiction therapist as well. So we like to try to help guys regain their healthy sexuality. And so we deal with a lot of guys who are HIV positive as well. And I've been positive since 1987. So
we're not going to have any slides here, except that John did prepare some slides if you want to talk about the our clinic for a men's health clinic with STD screening and HPV screening and a human papillomavirus screening. So if you have any interest in that, he has some slides for you then. Other than that, no slides, because we want to open this up for a discussion to find out how you, our audience, are dealing with dating, sex, and self-image as we are getting older with HIV, and Palm Springs is a wonderful place to discuss that here. So before sharing, I'll open up with a sharing of myself. I became positive in my second year of residency in 1996. My lover at the time was HIV positive. And back then, the medications weren't so great, if you remember. They were hard to take, and we didn't suppress everybody. And a couple of years into our relationship, we said, okay, if I really love him, maybe I'll go without the condoms. And at some point, I seroconverted. And it was right on Folsom Street Fair. I felt awful on Folsom Street Fair. And I got tested the next week, and it was positive. So that's how I became positive during the time. But it was actually during a good, a hopeful time. The year before, PCP was still a death sentence. But by the time my residency ended, the hospitals were empty, and most of our HIV positive patients were being treated on an outpatient basis. So there was some great hope at that time. And it sounds odd to say, but it was actually probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because it gave me a focus. I entered HIV medicine, and it also taught me to take care of my health, and that health was important if you're HIV positive. So not always a bad story, but we also realized that patients, especially people living with HIV longer, may have some very negative stories about dating, self-image, and re-entering the world, especially if you've lost a partner, a long-term partner to HIV, and are now re-entering the gay social world. It can be a very savage place. So we wanted to open it up to patients, to our audience participants here, to talk about any issues that you might be having or any concerns you might be having. As facilitators here, what we are to do is we're going to help give our input on some of the addiction issues that may happen, that arise in that, some of the STD issues that may happen, and I'm here to offer any medical issues as far as if you have any questions about serious discordant relationships, risk factors for transmission, risk reduction, things like that. It's not a medical focus session, but we're there to give you the medical backup if you have any questions that are regards that. So anybody here want to talk about relationship issues that they're concerned about? Difficult to open up to your maybe not gay physician or somebody who want to talk about relationship issues in an unbiased atmosphere, and no questions are off limits here.
I was diagnosed in 2005.
We're recording this.
Oh, okay. I was diagnosed in 2005, and my partner at the time was negative. And we basically stopped having sex at that point, or very little. And when we did have sex, he would immediately jump up and run into the shower and wash himself off. And I felt like a pariah at that time. And I told him that, and he said to me, well, I can't help myself. And after 10 years of being together, one day he got up, walked into a closet, packed it and left. And it took me almost 3 years to recover from that. And I have not, and that happened in 2011, and I have not been back into the dating scene since then. Nor, unfortunately, do I have any desire to. Basically, because of all the two things. Number one is that I'm positive, and I just don't want to get into the whole scene of dating someone who's negative. I can't give someone the virus. And number two, emotionally, I can't open myself up to being hurt again like that.
Plenty of stuff in there to talk about. Just so as far as getting into the meat of the medical issue there, as far as your transmissibility, you're undetectable in your medication?
I've been undetectable for 9 years.
So what the data we have for undetectable and viral load and a serodiscordant relationship comes from something called the partner study. It's a 2-year study that took a look at serodiscordant couples where one is positive and one is negative, and the negative one is not on anything to prevent HIV transmission, not on PrEP. And it was both in heterosexuals and gay couples, about 600 heterosexual couples, 300 gay couples. And over the 2 years of the study, the positive one was undetectable for the entire study. And in this study, in the gay couples at least, the top was the positive one 70% of the time in the gay couples. And for the 2 years of the study, there were 0 transmissions from the positive partner to the primary negative partner. So no transmissions from the positive partner to the negative partner. There were some seroconversions that occurred during the study, but when they analyzed the virus, the virus didn't match the partner's virus. The virus came up from outside the relationship. And in the heterosexual couples is interesting. There were only 1% of them had open relationships. There was one seroconversion among the heterosexuals. But in the gay partners, 30% of them had open relationships, and there were 10 seroconversions among the gay couples. But none of the seroconversions matched the partner's virus. So none of those viruses came from the HIV positive partner. So what the partner study showed is that the observed rate for 2 years was 0 transmissions. But because of statistics, you can't say the statistical rate is 0 for transmission. There has to be a theoretical upper limit of normal. And by the end of the partner study, when they had 2 years of data, it was the chances of seroconversion were 100 for a couple being together for 100 years, what we call 100 partner years, or 10 couples being together for 10 years, or 100 couples being together for 1 year. But the rate of transmission is from 0 to the upper limit would be 1.4 transmissions. It's the theoretical upper limit of normal. But it's pretty darn close to 0 because the observed transmission is 0. And what they're doing right now is they're extending the partner study for an additional 3 years so they have more data, and they're enrolling more gay men. And so hopefully that confidence interval will tighten even more, so it's going to be pretty close to 0. So right now the observed transmission rate is 0 for serodiscordant couples if the positive one is negative.
Can I speak to one thing? In addition to that, so one of the other issues that you brought up is the idea of the HIV negative partner. So there's PrEP today, right? So that's Truvada for PrEP. The statistics are telling us that that's 95% and up in terms of effective. So the people are using that medication on a regular basis, which right now is recommended and approved for daily use, that an HIV positive individual is not transmitting, or even if there's transmission, there's no pickup of the virus, right? So that's another positive thing for those of us out there as well. Yeah.
And the thing about PrEP works where it needs to work. So PrEP reduces the risk of transmission, which is unprotected anal-receptive sex. So when the study found out that everything else, unprotected anal-receptive sex is not all that risky, but when you include the unprotected anal-receptive sex, that's where it actually really does the best risk factor reduction. So the biggest risk factor reduction is that. So it works where it needs to work. And I will be honest, hardly any of our PrEP patients use condoms. Very few. So, and we have probably over 300 PrEP patients, no seroconversions. And all the PrEP studies that are going on through the United States, no seroconversions so far. The only seroconversion we had was from a guy who lost his insurance, was off PrEP, but was still engaged in unprotected sex. Then he converted. That was the only thing.
So broke it out there.
I just want to address from the psychological standpoint, because for those of us who are HIV positive and getting out there in the dating world, the terms like clean, when you see those in profiles, how many of you guys are on a dating app? Yeah, I don't even actually go on a date on the dating app. And you know, and this is, and believe me, this isn't any judgment about this. But right now, here it is, 2018. We have so many different ways of reaching out and meeting other guys. But then, if you don't have a thick skin to some degree, it's kind of like if you're not a good door-to-door salesman, you know, where you're going to get a few doors slammed in your face. If you can't take that, going on some of the dating apps is not that great of an idea because you're opening yourself up to that much more rejection. And it is kind of amazing here in 2018 with PrEP, with undetectability, that people are still referring to them. They're looking for someone who's clean or DDF. Oh my God. Disease-free. Yeah, so, you know, and it's, I don't know about you guys, but when I see somebody has that language in their profile, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, you know, block, delete, whatever. But then, you know, sometimes it kind of gives me an opportunity to go back in and say, well, maybe I'm going to educate these guys. Yeah, wrong call. You know? But it is interesting how, what we find in my practice that a lot of guys my age, I'm 54, I've been positive since I was 23. My husband is the first guy that I ever dated who was HIV positive. And that was such a freeing experience. Because there was something when I was positive, they were negative. When we're having sex, and in my head, I'm yelling, don't come, don't come, don't come, as we're having intercourse. Yet that's not exactly the best thing to be having when you're having sex. It's not a lot of fun. So sometimes serial matching or being congruent, sometimes that can help, which basically dating other guys that are positive. Here in Palm Springs, we have a very large pool of guys around our population, our age, that are also HIV positive. But the thing that most concerns me is guys our age that use crystal meth as currency. And by that I mean they're able to get younger guys to come over to have sex because they entice them with drugs. They have no intention of using crystal meth. Oh, it's just, you know, I'm just being a good host, right? You know. And before you know it, the guys that are hosting are also now using. And the effects of crystal meth on those of us that are HIV positive, and whether or not then you're going to be compliant with your meds, and it just has a whole myriad of complications. But it's one of those things that when, in our discussion this morning, let's talk about, because I'm looking up, we're no spring chickens in this room, you know? And so sometimes just not only about being HIV positive, but also aging and what that dynamic and being a long-term survivor, what does that mean? And when we're dating and when we're going out with people that don't have a shared experience. You know, recently on Will and Grace, there was an episode where both Jack and Will were dating guys that were like 29, 27. They didn't know what Stonewall was. They didn't, you know, all of these things that kind of go into that factor that I think are all relative. Because right now, for many of us, myself included, HIV is probably the least of my worries right now, as being 54. So, and now I'm probably going to be back out into the dating world soon. So, being able to open myself up to that again, you know, and I do encourage you to get back out because, frankly, a new study just came out, the longevity of life. The more social interaction you have, the longer you're going to live.
And as far as, again, this is a talk on HIV and aging, and I will back that up, what Terry was saying, is that in my practice, taking care of mostly HIV positive men, the HIV is like problem number 3 or 4 on their list. It's hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, the risk factors for lung cancer, all that other stuff are the big things. The nice thing is that we HIV positive people are dying of all the boring things now. We're dying of heart disease, we're dying of cancer. Whereas before we were dying of Kaposi sarcoma and HIV-related lymphomas and things like that. We don't see that anymore. For the past 6 years, none of my patients that have died at Eisenhower Hospital have died of an HIV-related cause. It's all been heart attacks and cancer. And the boring regular cancers, like lung cancer and colon cancer. So the good thing is we're living longer. The bad thing is we are living longer. We're having to deal with the fact that we're aging and HIV positive and sometimes having to re-enter the dating world. So we wanted to open it again to you guys. If you had any experiences you want to talk about that you're concerned about, that may have some relevance, then we can give you some feedback on some of the medical aspects or some of the social aspects on how to deal with that. So anybody here?
Thank you. It is interesting because, it wasn't long ago, and for, well, I've been HIV positive about 34 years, and so I knew I could kill someone with sex, and that was true. So I was sort of typhoid Mary and I damaged goods. And then, of course, we knew exactly pretty much how it was transmitted, using condoms and safer sex and all that. And many HIV negative men understood this, they understood the, and we all kind of understood, and zero discord happened, and safely and not safely, depending upon whatever. But, and I did date negative men who I think had evolved and were fine, actually. So that was a nice thing. Now, interestingly, I'm not typhoid Mary. I mean, it's the first time I'm not infectious. So just sort of those psychological little things happen to me. I can't infect you. And there's also PrEP, which means that negative men can empower themselves and not be at risk. So we have both these things going on at the same time. Now, me being a positive person, it's maybe more important to me, or maybe not. But heads and hearts are two different things. And I have found also sometimes with men who are negative, even though they're on PrEP and they understand what's practical, it's hard to get out of that heart space versus that fear. No, from them at times. Because even though they know knowledge-wise, it's very unlikely anything's going to happen, it's still a risk. For me, actually, no, I'm actually a little bit more rebellious now about it. I don't have the same compassion towards them anymore, because educate yourself, you live amongst these people, me, whatever, and I have a little bit more of a fuck you attitude, I have to say about it. But I also haven't met any evolved people even today. But the greater problem, interestingly, isn't so much zero discordance and things, or HIV. It's how you date. How do you date when you're, I'm turning 60, how do you date? And I've been single a long time, so I should know how to date, but also with all the phone apps, the sex apps, and the dating apps, we're just not nice to each other.
That's right. It's very discriminatory.
Well, I don't even know if it's discriminatory, it's just like we're just not nice. I think many of us may have the same thing. I'm on like a dating site, not a sex one, I'm really dating one. And 50% of the guys, when I say let's have coffee, are gone. And then the ones that say okay, you get stood up by 30% of them. I guess that's where I'm having my major problem now, is understanding why all these people are online looking to date. And when someone says, let's get together, they're gone, or they will stand you up. When most of them know it's just not nice to do that. So that there's the greatest frustration, and I can run through a whole site, and I've already seen they've already said no. So I don't know where that comes from. Being just discourteous and just not being nice to each other. How could you you could text someone and say, I can't make it. So it's an interesting thing. So I don't know if are they on just, and they don't even know why, but they're on to get affirmed perhaps, and they've
Can
done
I
that.
address that real quick?
Yeah.
We find the number one issue in the gay community psychologically is not sex addiction, surprisingly, is an intimacy disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to connect, and so drugs and alcohol are the number one. Alcohol's there's nothing wrong with alcohol. It's been around forever. It's been allowing people to socialize, to connect, to come together, to celebrate. But unfortunately for some, it becomes abused and it becomes problematic. Just like, for drugs themselves, drugs work to a point until the wheels fall off. But then when we start to realize, it's like, what is it about an intimacy disorder? Joe, what do you think I mean whenever I say that? You know, think about it when some guys say, oh, they love meth sex, chem sex. You've heard that term? Because it's so intense. Well, I can tell you, there's probably a little more intense for some of these guys than actually looking someone in the eye when they're having sex. Frankly, looking someone in the eye, when we have groups, so I'm trying to regain social interaction, and we just ask them, okay, let's circle up, and let's start going around and engaging in the eyes. And do that. And of course, you know, the rule for most gay men, if you lock eyes for more than 3 seconds, you want to have sex. Yeah. And the funny thing about it is that's also true for heterosexuals. At least the guys think that. Oh, if she's looking at me more than 3 seconds, oh, she wants to have sex. But of course, that's usually not true. But it's that intimacy disorder, that thing, because I think guys, in some regard, genetically, we didn't get the gene that helps us with rejection very well. Gay or straight. We don't deal with rejection well at all. And so if we were putting ourselves out there, making ourselves vulnerable, that, oh, this guy may actually like me or not like me, or be turned on by me or not, that's a very vulnerable place. And of course, you know, so, and especially for those of us that have been HIV for so long, and have been kind of outcast for so long, and sometimes even on, how many guys have been on disability at all in their lives? Yeah, I was on disability for 12 years before I went back to school and went to graduate school for the second time. Because it was interesting when Alex was talking, I had internalized Kaposi sarcoma, kicked me out the first time, and then when I went back, I got AIDS-related lymphoma. And so, you know, making that decision and feeling when you're disabled and your whole financial well-being is based on a disability or being ill or being sick or being that point of our psyche, when do we purge that fully and fully being able to engage? So there's so many things. I'm just incredibly impressed that we could get out of bed this morning and actually make it here sometimes, of all the stuff that we have to deal with. I mean, my gosh, you know, being a long-term survivor is not for wusses by any means. And so if you guys have been able to do this, I think being able to re-engage socially and even having that desire, that's where it first starts. I mean, like for, you know, in the 12-step program, all you have to do is have the desire. And I think to re-engage on the dating level, and one last encouragement, I'm going to pass this on to John. You know, sometimes I think that, unfortunately, it may be our lot in life to be educators. Because the faster the folks are out there that are educated, the better for us. And so when we come across some guy that may be a little more ignorant about it, as frustrating as it may be, I just like to say, okay, I'm going to kind of set that aside for a second and say, hey, can we have a conversation? Because I think you're a little slow on the latest updates right now, and this could really be beneficial to you. Because I think the more that we do that, then the better off we as a community is going to be, and the faster that's going to happen. But I know the anger and all of that is, and the grief, we haven't even started talking about grief. Unresolved grief, I think, is a huge issue for those of us that have lost so many people, but we are, even the term, long-term survivor, you know, why are we so lucky? What do we do? You know, that's a question I ask myself all the time. You know,
Survivor's guilt.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, just approaching this, one thing we know from social research as far as internet dating and hookup sites. Some of the research is pointing to the fact that we may need to go back to the bars and actually interacting in person. Because when you interact in person, you put up a little bit of an air, but the guy can see you and they can talk to you. If you're interacting online, they can put up the biggest air, you have no idea what they look like. They say, oh, of course, I'm 6 foot tall, I'm blonde, I've got muscles, and they don't look like that. So you can put up a lot of airs online. You have no intimate connection to that person, so you don't care if you hurt their feelings. But what we did this morning, we actually held hands this morning, talked to each other, greeted each other. It's hard to lie to someone that way. So you have to, unfortunately, the research has shown us, you have to expect a certain number of liars online because it's easy to lie online. The other thing, just from genetic research, we are men, and sexually we men are designed to have as many sexual partners as possible and spread our genetic code as much as possible. We weren't designed evolutionarily for intimacy. But we're gay men, so we have some feminization of parts of our brain that want intimate relationships. So we're designed to have a lot of sex, but be sorry that we did and we weren't intimate. So we've got the worst of both worlds in that regard. So you got to be careful about what you expect online from what the research says. And some of the research is saying, probably better go back to going to the bars and actually talk to someone in person, or have social interactions, or men's groups, or those various things. It's harder to lie to someone to their face. So that was the only thing that came out of the research. Anyone else?
Anyone else?
I had a question about the PrEP. Is it difficult for someone to want to be on PrEP because of the expense? I mean, I think being HIV positive, it's easy for us to get our medication because we have a condition. But let's say someone that is HIV negative that wants to go on PrEP, is it difficult for them to go to their doctor and say, hey, I want to be on PrEP? You know, why do you want to be on PrEP? You know, or will my insurance approve it? I mean, is it getting easier for that expense to be approved for people to get on PrEP?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question, and I think it's a really, really good question, and I think the perception is, I talk to so many people that have that perception that they're not going to be able to do it because of that reason. But there are so many ways today to get onto programs that either can assist you, whether it's a copay program, whether it's a income-based program. There's so many ways to be able to do this. I don't know that I've had a person yet that I've had to say, sorry, you can't get on because of medication. We've always figured it out. Now, one area that we are having an issue with is, I guess at 65, you're supposed to stop having sex, right? So obviously that comes up in Palm Springs, right? So we're working with that, and it's my understanding there's some programs that we're getting involved with the state of California to fix that. Because Medicare does not allow for an individual to use these copay cards and so on and so forth. Yeah, so we're working on that one, yeah.
The quick and easy down and dirty question is, PrEP is an FDA-approved indication, so it is covered by insurance. It has to be covered by your insurance if you have insurance. They, however, can charge you whatever copay they want. Right. So they can say, yes, it's covered, but you have to pay a $300 copay every month for this drug. Right. So the manufacturer, that makes Truvada, does have a copay assistance program that will cover a copay for up to $400 per month. You just go to Truvada.com and download a copay assistance card, and then the pharmacist charges the copay to that. The problem we have is with our Medicare patients who are on Medicare, the copay assistance card doesn't work for Medicare, so we have to find some additional services for them. Those are unfortunately extremely limited. The other problem is if you don't have insurance, that's very difficult to get that covered. There are some local programs, state programs, and city programs that cover that. You know, San Francisco's making great strides about trying to get PrEP covered for the uninsured. And there are some programs again in LA that are trying to get to the uninsured. AIDS Healthcare Foundation doesn't believe in PrEP, but the Jeffrey Goodman Clinic does. So they're getting some programs for it. So it varies from place to place. If you have insurance, it is an FDA-approved indication, but it's maybe a higher copay.
And if you don't, there are places like DEP actually has they call a PrEP navigator who actually speaks to you about the financial aspect of it and tries to work that out for you.
We have a question. Yeah. And we have a question from one of the audience members. Is it possible to pass a different strain of HIV if you are undetectable? Okay. So the basic issue as far as if you are HIV positive, if you are undetectable, you basically have very little virus to transmit, essentially no virus to transmit. So even if you had a resistant strain of HIV, but your physician managed to get you down to undetectable, you now have no virus to transmit. The studies that we talked about in the last group that took a look at that, there was something called the Polish study, which took a look at does undetectable blood mean undetectable in the semen? And these were guys who were donating sperm to get a surrogate pregnant, an HIV positive guy who wanted to get a surrogate pregnant. So every time they went to the fertility clinic, they gave a blood sample and they jacked off in a cup, and they measured the viral load in the blood and the viral load in the semen at the same time. If they were undetectable and nothing was going on in the urethra, they were also undetectable in the semen 95% of the time. But 4.6% of the time, there was a detectable viral load in the semen, even though they were undetectable in the blood. And the viral loads in the semen range from as little as 200 copies to as much as 2,000 copies. 200 copies, probably not enough to transmit. 2,000 copies, maybe. So there's a little bit of a discord in that. There was a different study that was done in an STD clinic. So these were HIV positive guys, undetectable on medications, but they're going in for something going on with gonorrhea or chlamydia. And the data from that study was very, very different. So they had a detectable viral load in their semen 25% of the time, and the viral loads were much higher. So it depends on what's going on in the urethra. So if you've got nothing going on in the urethra, you can be reassured that it's extremely low risk for transmission. The data from the partner study tells us very low risk for transmission. But if there's some infection going on there, like gonorrhea or chlamydia or some urinary tract infection, higher rates of viral load detectability in the semen, even though they're undetectable in the blood.
I just have a quick question. So if guys are using PrEP, are they less likely to use condoms? So then they're higher for probably other STDs and STIs. Are there prophylactic medications for, say, syphilis, for gonorrhea, for chlamydia, that they could be taking in conjunction with PrEP?
So it's a great question. The short answer is absolutely, right? So we're seeing STD rates rise, right? And are there medications, the second part of that, to prophylactically take? Well, there's discussion around that. There are studies that are happening, but right now there are not. What's really interesting about this is what I've learned is to work with my patients and partner with them to be proactive. So I had an HIV positive patient the other day who said to me, "This is just not fair." And I said, what are you talking about? He said, "Your PrEP patients come in every 3 months." I told you this. Come in every 3 months and you do all their STD screens, and we don't get that, right? You have 10 minutes left? Okay, all right. So that was a really good point for me to hear. And so what I say as I partner with patients is take the bull by the horns, right? If you're going to have that behavior, terrific. And then go out and be tested. So if you need to be tested every 3 months, if you need to be tested every month if there's a problem, please do so, right? Because the rates are higher. What's also interesting is STD testing for a straight male is not the same as it is for a man who has sex with men, right? So for example, my own experience is I established with a local Kaiser here when I moved to town 3 years ago. When I asked for an STD panel, I went to the lab and they got urine. Not nearly enough, right? So there has to be swabs, both rectally and orally, depending upon what sort of activity that you're engaging in, right? So that's really, really important. But what you also need to know is that 80% of rectal, 80% of pharyngeal, throat, gonorrhea and chlamydia are asymptomatic. You have no idea that it's there. So unknowingly, you may be spreading these things. So take the bull by the horn and go and get tested, right? If it takes every 3 months, then do it every 3 months.
And we do have a STD or men's sexual health clinic, and it was true because our HIV positive guy said, "Hey, we only get tested every time we come in for our office." And it's like, okay, if you had a really busy weekend, if you came back from Folsom Street Fair, go to the sexual health clinic and get swabbed. It's like if you use it, they swab it. So
right.
if you're a total bottom, they swab your ass. If you're sucking dick, they're going to swab your throat. So they swab whatever you use. The other question was about prophylaxis for our highly sexually active men. Is there a way to decrease risk factors for gonorrhea, chlamydia, or syphilis transmission? There were some studies. There was a small pilot study and a larger Seattle study which took a look at that. And they were looking at doxycycline for prophylactic use to decrease transmission. Doxycycline is second-line therapy for syphilis, it's second-line therapy for chlamydia, and it's third-line therapy for gonorrhea. And what the small pilot study found that it significantly reduced rates in sexually active gay men, but the much larger Seattle study, which took a look at it, said it worked pretty well for gonorrhea, it worked pretty well for chlamydia, and it worked well for syphilis, but it didn't do anything for gonorrhea, because there's so much gonorrhea resistance now that the doxycycline really didn't work for gonorrhea. So we do have some things that can be used for our highly sexually active patients that may help decrease the risk factors for that, but then we worry about the development of a resistance to those drugs as well. So it's generally for a well-selected, well-compliant group of men. So if I have patients that, they say that, okay, I'm gonna go on the Atlantis cruise in a week and I'm gonna have sex every single day as much as possible, then we'll actually put them on doxycycline prophylaxis for all the time that they're there, and 10 days after they come back, and they do have a decreased incidence of both the syphilis and chlamydia, but by the Seattle study, not probably. So.
Any other questions or comments?
Anything else? How much time do we have left?
Yeah, about 8 minutes.
About 8 minutes. It was an 8-minute question. Any thoughts?
So to me, probably one of the biggest challenges about dating and about getting back out there is definitely, I don't know about you guys, but if you think that sexual positioning is determined by your HIV status. Yes? No? Hopefully not. Because now, do you know, it's interesting, the number one relationship status in gay relationships is what? Open. So now then, this provides a whole other gamut, which I think that for straight couples, it's actually presented them with the dialogue now. They're actually, I kind of laugh, I see a lot of straight clients who come in who have infidelity as part of their story, and their partners that we treat as well are trying to figure out, how could you have done this and so forth. And I'm like, I hate to tell you, but, and maybe I'm jaded because I see a lot of my subject pool is rather skewed. So I see a lot of guys that are engaged in infidelity. I think kind of when they go up there to that podium, there at the altar, and they're saying, I do, it's kind of clicking that I agree on that software that you're downloading, that you didn't exactly read everything of the service agreement. It's like, yes, I want it, just give me what I want, of course. And then they go on, and they say yes to whatever, and then we're like, well, I didn't really mean that. I mean, of course, it's like, well, of course I'm gonna have sex outside, but you're just not supposed to know about it. But the interesting thing that I think what we have brought from the gay community to the straight community is the dialogue. Let's talk about sexual parameters. Because the fact of the matter is, men are created differently, and so we have more challenges as far as around sexual parameters at times. And so having that open dialogue, but so here for you guys, what do you lend to? Do you want to have a monogamous relationship? Do you want to have an open relationship? Do you want to have, we're only going to play if we're both in the room, or all of those, there's so many different options now. And so the interesting thing is, but we are having that dialogue. We are talking about it. What does it mean to have an open relationship? Because it used to be, 30 years ago, having an open relationship meant, HIV could enter in and really change the dynamic. Now there are these other STIs. But so when you're dating, it was interesting when my husband and I, our very first date, we had 3 questions. First question, HIV status. Second question, Democrat or Republican. Third question, okay, on the count of 3, do you believe in monogamy? No. Okay, great. All right, you're a winner. All right, step on up. And there we go. All right. But what does that mean? And it's interesting because I think for us to start talking about what does monogamy, what is intimacy, how can we express ourselves on an intimate level with other people and not be threatening? Because here today, you just had, we're talking about our HIV status. I'm sure you all may have shared your HIV status. I'm not making an assumption that everybody in this room is HIV positive, but many of us are. And that just 20, 25, 30 years ago, I don't know about you, I came out, I was a little gay boy in Oklahoma. When I came out, it was very, very public. Somebody was trying to blackmail me, was going to tell my new boyfriend that I was HIV positive. And the strange thing, gave me a cocktail napkin at a gay bar. It was big, it was during the holidays in Oklahoma City. And I looked down and said, if you don't give me 1380, I'm going to tell Todd you're HIV positive. So of course the first thing in my mind was like, how do you know? The second thing is, what the hell is 1380? And I looked at him and there was the drag show going on. And I made my way down, I'm like, well, I guess I'm gonna go get the money, and because what I'm gonna do, because I didn't know anybody who was HIV positive in Oklahoma. Nobody. I knew plenty of people had AIDS, because they couldn't hide it. And so I was terrified. So I go down, and I'm like, I can't go to an ATM. Where am I going to get this money? And I look over, and there she is, my savior. Ginger Lamar, the queen of 39th Street, 8 foot tall and hair in heels, doing her monologue. And I go over to the edge, just about like this, and she sees me, and I said, and she goes, "What can I do for you, honey?" And I was, and I show her the note. I said, "What?" And I pointed up at the guy. She's, "Oh my God." She's like, "Well, what do you want to do?" I was, "Can I have the mic?" "Here you go." She steps out and looks up at Checkers, the DJ, and says, "Got it." And music stops, and everybody's kind of carrying on, and I go out there, and all of a sudden, Ginger yells, "Spot!" Boom! And I'm shaking. And I'm like, "Hey, hi everybody, hi, I'm Terry." "Hey, Terry, what's up?" "Yeah, hi. I'm like, "Well, hey, look, and I'm shaking. And I'm like, "I've got this note from that guy right there. It says he's going to tell my new boyfriend, Todd, right there, that I'm HIV positive if I don't pay him." And it just hit me. I'm 23, and I can't live my life that way for the rest of my life, scared. So, and then Todd freaks out, throws his drink down, goes out the escape, fire escape. And everybody's like, "Oh." And I'm like, "So, now you know. If you want to go out with me, I am HIV positive. If you don't want to go out with me, that's cool too. If you want to just sit down and get to know each other, that would be great too. And for God's sake, if you're HIV positive, please come talk to me. Please. I don't know anybody else who is." And it was silent. And then all of a sudden, it just erupted. And I started crying. And interestingly, after that, I had plenty of guys who were native were coming up and saying, "Hey, thank you so much." And I was just still shaking. And then having that vulnerability after something, "Oh my God, what did I just do?" I just outed myself to the gay public of Oklahoma City. But you know what? That moment, and never turning back, was definitely a before and after moment. So now I'm so incredibly here in our gay bubble of Palm Springs, that we have so much more opportunity. But my hope for you guys is that it's like, hey, I'm a long-term survivor with HIV. I've got so many stories to tell. I've got so many experiences. I've got so many "Oh my God, I can't believe I did that" moments. Let's have coffee and let's talk about that. And let's be able to relate to one another on a human level. Because that, to me, beyond the sex, beyond the marriage, beyond any of that, the experiences that we have, that we can share together, are so incredibly amazing and so life-affirming. And that, to me, is what this whole conference is about, is affirming our lives and affirming our experiences. And so, thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Terry, John, and Alex, thank them.